Okay, thanks everyone. If we can start with this. Apparently I'm moderating this one as well. Thank you, Dean.
The best, I got the best.
Okay, so now we are talking about the diversity in DAOs. And apparently beyond that, let's try to tackle like the whole complex of diversity questions, because DAO is basically a subset of two things, let's say, right? So the IT industry in general, because most of the things in our, let's say, sub-industry of blockchain, crypto, and whatever is driven by technology in the first place. And then we'll try to also see, like, how diverse DAOs actually are, how can we improve that, how can we bring effectively more people with different opinions into that, right? Because I guess, after all, diversity is all about that, right? So let's try to do that. Maybe like a little intro, especially like, what particular role, let's get back to the yesterday's topic, you have in a DAO or in organization that you are with, and so on.
Yeah, so I can kick off. So I'm Dante. That's babydante. Yeah, we're the core. Well, I'm a core contributor in Jet, and also working with some other protocols, mostly around advisory towards creating the DAO, scaling the DAO, basically putting them on the right way for decentralization. And this one is just making a nice face and making sure everyone is having fun.
Hi, I'm Mac. I'm elected board member for MonkeDAO, also for Photo Finish, co-founder for Coinzo MonkeDAO and Mintus. But mostly I'm just Nom's #1 intern at this point. So
I'm co-founder and CEO of Squads. It's a multi-sig deployment protocol on Solana. I don't know if you...
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. But like, from the perspective also of walks of life, let's say, right? So development,
marketing community.
A little bit of everything, I guess.
Yeah, makes sense.
Everything.
Yeah, yeah. At the end of the day, I guess we all wind up doing everything, right? Okay. So now let's try to tackle, like, let's start from the general IT industry, right? Like, I guess it's there is at least a stereotype still, I guess, that it's dominated by cisgender white male, right? And I guess it's pretty much true, right? I mean, for whatever reasons, right? Do you feel that it exists still? Do you feel like that's an obstacle, that it's a problem? And, is it like also geographically different from, let's say, US to Europe to Asia and so on?
I think the space has gotten a lot better, at least since I first came in, going to Lisbon at Breakpoint back in November. It definitely looks a lot different than how I'm looking around the room right now and what I'm seeing. But we still have ways to go. Even just doing an AMA for MonkeDAO with Solana Japan the other day, we talked about the barriers and the language barrier that is keeping a lot of people that are interested in being devs within the space. But anywhere they look, they feel like everything's in English and they're not sure how to get into the space when they just want to learn and write codes. And it's just so baffling to me even to hear that, especially when we're like, we need devs, we need devs, we need devs. So how do we get them in, and how do we break this, even just something as simple as a language barrier in this global community? And how do we take that first step forward, right? So that's just, I think we have gone a long way, but I think there's still definitely things that we can do to improve to kind of move forward.
I mean, inclusion in the end. Now I need to say that one thing that I see very, very different when it comes to the traditional world, let's say, and then the crypto space is how easy it is actually. And I mean, I'm a fresh cooked mom, like this thing has 5 months. And he's been around already on offsites with the teams, on different events. It's amazing with how much the DAO, not only a DAO, but how much the way of working in the space basically enables families and enables women to basically be there, participate in anything, and not give up on the family life as well. I mean, everyone has been super supportive with this little guy over here. Everyone is taking care of him, I think, more than me. Yeah, he wants the mic now. Yeah, you want to say something? Yeah, no, okay. So yeah, that's my view. Like, I think this is a great space for diversity, and it's a great space to give opportunities to maybe to not only to women. I need to say that it's also, I mean, my partner is also in the same space, and we've been traveling together. We've been taking care of him together, and it's amazing. And it's something that probably I would not be able to do in the traditional, let's say, world and traditional space. That's my take on it.
And I think in some form, sorry. I think in some form, diversity is, I think it's definitely a problem, but there is also a way to, I think like the crypto space naturally solves it in a way. If you have like pseudonymous identities and people are kind of mostly judged by their skills and contributions, you kind of, diversity is kind of built in, right? Because you sort of value by other things without kind of relying on, some subjective matters. So I think in that respect, that probably is interesting how diversity in DAOs will work if, you know, everyone is pseudonymous, right? How do you know that the DAO is diverse? That's, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, I guess that's the main difference, right? So if traditional crypto is driven because, like, you know, of anonymity as well, right? You don't know who is behind a nickname or an address or something like that, right? While traditional companies are like trying to enforce diversity for whatever reasons, but I guess one of the most important reasons is exactly that, like diversity of opinions as well, right? Because we do come from different backgrounds, because we come from different walk of life, and you know, a lot of it that matters, right? We can't build products for a global community if we are not a global community in the first place, right? So again, knowing that, like, say, a majority of developers, for example, would come in from certain backgrounds, right? And you want to have product that addresses, you know, different communities. How would we and should we try to enforce diversity on, let's say, protocol level somehow? DAO level, of course, right? Because DAO is all about governance as well, right? Do we want to make sure we are hearing different opinions?
And I think like cultural diversity is one, but also like economic diversity, right? Yeah. That's not solved, right?
Yeah.
Like
if we are talking about like, you know, decentralizing finance and making inclusive finance, and we are all coming from, I don't know, first world country, we don't know first thing about that.
Yeah. So I think that's it's a really good topic that you came up with, Dean. We actually have, I don't think a lot of it is solved. We're just here to jam.
Bring up the issue.
Yeah, and it's cultural, economic, but also age diversity. There is no limitation, and that comes back to pseudonymous contributors, that comes back to working online, let's say. You can have folk 16 years old being in there and providing their input, and you can have folk on 60 plus providing the same type of input, and nobody is judging them. Yeah, no, you no input from you.
Baby diversity.
Baby diversity. So
Baby diversity. Yeah, we just got Dean into Boomer DAO with me the other day, and as much as we joke about, you know, what age means and how we work, it is different, you know, when it comes to someone who's like, I'm almost 40, how I view work and my work experience is going to be different from somebody who's maybe in their early 20s. So it's like, how do we bridge that gap? You know, how do we stay efficient and stay on topic, but at the same time, make sure that all of us feel like we're still staying within our comfort zone, because then it's a little bit, it just increases productivity when we're all on the same page. But like you said, when it comes from the age gap, the, you know, the whole diversity when it comes to the culture backgrounds and stuff too as well, you add that to a global community. It's like, where do we find that sweet spot in the middle, right?
So I guess we need go ahead.
So I guess, you know, thinking about diversity in tech, you know, even Web2 diversity hasn't been great, obviously getting better. And I think the Web3 community, at least initially, is comprised mostly of developers. Representation-wise, developers, not great from a diversity standpoint. And as we're all creating this new industry together, I wonder, are there things we can be doing proactively to try to increase that diversity among people making the shift into Web3, rather than being more reactive to it, which I think is what happened in Web 2. So I'm curious if all of you have a take on that.
So it's like in the sense that majority of contributors now are developers, and like how can we get more people involved like from other fields? That's kind of the idea.
So to me, like the organic trickle into Web3 will be predominantly developers predominantly poor diversity. So are there things that we can be doing proactively to try to see more diversity within Web3?
Well, I think like just to probably my take on this is like while some of us are building dApps and products and user-facing applications, I think we're still largely at the infrastructure stage. That's why I think developers are at the sort of highest demand right now, because there's so much technical infrastructure to be built, and it's so much further. Okay, and there's so much that like needs to be taken care of from a technical perspective. I think like it's once we get to a more active application stage, I think there will be just more people that are coming to build user-facing apps, and that will kind of bring more diversity in that respect. But yeah, I think like it's definitely worth doing more at this stage as well.
I want to say when we were doing like research for Mintus and Queens of MonkeDAO, we spoke a lot of women who are either in this space, but they're not very vocal about what they think or their stance, or people who want to get in the space. A lot of the feedback were that, some of the projects I've tried to get into, they just feel like, they get into general chat and it feels like a men's locker room, and I'm not saying that's the same thing for every project, but it's like, okay, so how do we shift from this viewpoint of getting into a space they're not comfortable with because it is predominantly run by men, to now we created this channel on MonkeDAO called Queens of MonkeDAO, and it's a place where, you can come and you can just kind of find people that are like-minded. And I'm really excited the fact that I found Leslie. I know Constina is here too as well. But I think it just kind of sets a different tone and a different vibe. And that's what's going to be able to help drive like the new, the crowd coming in. So I think it's just a matter of really listening and see what they would need for them to feel comfortable for that entry.
Yeah, from my side, I can actually say that it's starting to open to other profiles as well and to other people. I mean, I'm not a developer myself. I'm in the space more from the kind of, I don't want to say business perspective, because it kind of links back into what we try to move away from. But in the end, into the organizational side and into more process structure in terms of actually making frameworks around the work of the developers so that they can actually build products that make sense, that are sustainable, and that the whole, let's say, organization around can enable them to grow. So I think this is starting very slowly to go in. I have seen quite a lot of demand actually for that kind of profiles or those kind of services in the space. So I'm quite positive that it is, this type of diversity is going to come, and it's coming in. Of course, not diminishing the fact that, developers are in the end the baseline of everything that we're doing. But they need to have a powerful workforce around to enable them, as in any place, really.
Yeah, honestly, it's probably like I tend to say unpopular things. Crypto for a long time has been like developers building for developers, right? And that's been a problem, right? In the end of the day, normal people don't really care about, transactions or instructions or things like that, right? They don't understand it. They don't want to understand that. Like every normal user of any normal application doesn't want to know what's happening behind, or under the hood, right? And crypto community and blockchain community in general still tends to be pretty elitistic, right? It shows even in Twitter. You are elitistic if you are using on a daily level things like plebs, right? And crypto community does that a lot. So that's where we have a lot of work to do to bring this inclusivity, right, rather than exclusivity. But I also see a lot of things changing in the direction. I'm absolutely happy for Solana to have product managers, right? For God's sake, that's amazing, right? To actually drive things as a product. That's that's what's happening now. We see on ecosystem levels, protocol levels, and finally, I hope we're getting some products that are trying to be client facing, right? Trying to be simple and understandable for normal people, not for plebs, for normal people.
Yeah, I really appreciate all of those answers. And I think one of the things that strikes me in DAOs in particular, not just in Web3, is that from the standpoint of sort of work to be done, it's not just the developer role that's needed, right? There's design, marketing, community management, PR. There's so much potential there in terms of bringing folks from underrepresented backgrounds and having them sort of run with these roles. But Mac, to your point, it's really hard to get involved, right? You jump into the Discord, you have no clue how to get started, and especially coming from an underrepresented background, seeing all of these, GM sirs, as Leslie mentioned earlier, it can be really tough. And I know on the dev side, we have things like Build Space that are helping onboard folks into some of these communities. Have you all seen sort of good solutions to solve that onboarding problem for some of these non-technical roles? And if not, what would those solutions look like, and how can we help bring those solutions and that onboarding to light?
I think Super Team does it really well, right? And Grape as well. There's tons of non-technical bounties that kind of allow you to, and a lot of them are also deep dives. So they kind of, pay you to actually get involved and learn things and kind of figure out what things are. And then you kind of stick around in the space and start doing more. So I think Super Team, Grape, I'm sure I'm missing some other sort of kind of service DAOs on Solana that do this as well. But I think, those sort of come to mind. I think that's probably the easiest that I've seen so far. We actually done a bunch of these for Squads as well, and that's been I think one of the guys that did it for us is going to be sort of a part-time intern now, doing more of that. So I think that's a good way in.
Yeah, also participating in the forum discussions. That's the one thing that I've seen. Jet is definitely reaching out, for example, to people who are being open with discussions on forums from the user perspective, who has, I don't know, feedback on the design, feedback on things that are not very, very technical. That's the one way. And then the standard traditional one, just posting job posts, right? It always works. So if a protocol or if a project realizes that they actually need to bring people from outside, and again, from Jet's perspective, there are job posts on LinkedIn going towards the big audience, the standard audience, let's say, for profiles, and it's working really well. There are also, I think, some really good platforms that already are running job searches and headhunting for crypto space, not only for developers, actually for all the profiles. So solutions are coming up, but also just the traditional ways coming in.
Right. I think this is why I love coming to these hacker houses and doing AMAs. I think it's important to really identify the barriers and the pain points. Like I mentioned earlier, when we were doing the AMA with Solana Japan, language barrier, that's one of the things, right? So we hearing that, what do we do? So we were talking about in MonkeDAO, it's okay, so let's say we have tons of developers that want to learn Rust and they want to get into Solana and they're all Japanese native. What do we need to do to set up the language channel? But that means we need monkey police that can police in that specific language. How do we move forward once we have identified the barrier and the pain point, and then to just kind of start building off from that? So I think it's just more so really listening and keeping your ears open as far as what are, like I said, the barriers and the pain points that we're experiencing at this point, but also be able to put that into implementation as far as within your own DAO and how you can really widen that audience and just kind of keep building forward.
I agree with the language as being one of those very large barriers that aren't intuitive sometimes. We had an Indonesian community that was very strong. We still do, and we also have a Chinese one. But you see that we'll put effort into, okay, let's get the Chinese one, the Indonesian one moving. But the moment you move away from it, because you can't interact at that level, understanding the language, I think it becomes a really big challenge. I don't know what else to do. On the language side, I also think another opportunity is time, how often you're you're having AMAs or live, interactive talks. We traditionally do things at 6 p.m. UTC, but there's going to be people who, that's impossible for. They're working, like the socioeconomic comes back into play. Like some people, okay, they have an abundance of time. They can stay up to 2 a.m. for a mint, like those kind of things, I think come into play as well, the time zones. And I also think about certain accessibility features and keeping the barrier low, like Stepan. I'm sure the diversity on Stepan is probably the best in our space, right? Because it's such a low barrier on knowledge. Language probably doesn't really get into there as a problem. I don't know how many languages they support. And it's 24/7, right? You can interact with it and get really that full Stepan experience. But I want to talk about the language part a bit more. Like, what are some ideas, or how, are you prioritizing particular languages? Do you look at requests, or how big the population size is? Like, how do we address the language barrier?
I think this is where it's so important to empower your community members and really identify your global leaders that you have within your DAO. So for example, Nam and I end up doing that Solana Japan AMA because we literally had a monkey that posted on social that was like, hey, I'm a new monkey, I'm in Tokyo. And we're like, hey, welcome, new monkey. And then him and I just started a dialogue and about how we've been talking about marketing to Asia and how to really promote and what it will look like compared to what we've been doing in the US and in Europe. So that conversation led to him saying, hey, come on this AMA for Solana Japan. I'll help you translate. I will kind of be like the face and the facilitator for you guys. So I think it's the same thing for our global community where we have members all throughout the world. You just have to find the members that are going to be your lead, going to be your face within the city, within the country they're in, and just empower them, give them that trust saying that, you know what, I know you can represent MonkeDAO well and you're passionate about what we do. Here's a little bit more information. Ask us if any questions, but really just decentralized, which is the whole point of all of this, right?
Like, I don't know, 10, 12, something like that years ago, I was working in game development still. And I was working for a small studio when we've been developing MMORPGs, right? The power of community was so big at that time in MMORPGs that we managed, I was having localization and whatever. We managed to translate the game to 12 languages with zero budget, just because the community was out there and people were passionate about this thing that, it's a game, right? So it's easier to get passionate about it, I guess. But yeah, it was the same situation. A lot of people just came out and say, hey, I'm from Japan, I'm from Bulgaria, I'm from Germany. I want to help you translate that, right? So we had to proactively work with them to support them in doing so. And also rewards them obviously somehow within the game itself, but also like that grew them into community leaders that also helped keep the dynamic of the game itself going on, right? Because they became respected members, they got a whole group around them that actually increased in-game conflicts or alliances or whatever. So yeah, I totally agree. Utilizing your community and going out to your community and saying, let me support you in whatever you want to do for this is amazingly powerful sometimes. But yeah, it's a tough game because you need to with those people you need to be in constant contact. They need this appreciation on a daily level.
Yeah, I mean, we had those experiences as well, where people come into Discord and they say we want to do a deep dive and explainer video in this other language. And we encouraged it, supported it, but the kind of problem we ran into, maybe the squads team is too small, not diverse enough. We can't actually verify what they submitted, right? Because we don't speak some of those languages that they did it in. And so I think definitely working with the community, that's important. We kind of try to respond there. And then on the kind of metric side and tracking at least some of the geographics also helps to understand, where majority of the users comes from, and you at least can prioritize from that perspective, where do you start? Eventually you want to get to a place where, the app is available in all languages, but you kind of take it from the metrics, I guess, initially. That's what we're sort of doing right now.
No, for me, I mean, there are two questions here as well, like with the language barrier. One is, how do you push your product, let's say, out there? And here, for example, Jet does the same community. So community members coming up saying, I would like to translate it to Chinese. I would like to translate it to Indonesian or whatever. So this actually does come from the community, and we've seen that. But this kind of enables only the part of the sales or marketing or whatever we want to call it, or awareness for the product in a certain country. But what I also have seen is that there is a lot of need for like non-English content or non-English guidance, just for the people to understand what Web3 and crypto space is. So that is something that, for example, I mean, I'm from Poland and I'm experiencing it with my own family. It's like there are no resources out there that I can point them to and say, yeah, read this or check this website or go to this event and you will understand more or less at least what I do. That doesn't exist. And this is the one thing that at least I'm trying to help them out maybe with the events. There is now ETH Warsaw coming up. I'm getting my mom involved to help with the logistics of the event. She speaks only Polish, but at least with this, she could interact with people and get a little bit of a gist what's going on. But this is for me one of the biggest challenges, let's say, in the countries that are not so much English speaking. How do you get them into the space in general, not specifically even for the product, but just into crypto and Web3?
Right. We had a recent conversation with one of our leads in Hong Kong, and one of his suggestions was just really taking all the information we have and just really condense it or break it apart, where when you're translating, you're not translating a 5-page white paper, right? You're translating these actual details and these messages that you really want to push out first and get across, because the more you have to translate, it kind of leaves a little bit more room for error, that the translation doesn't exactly interpret what you're trying to say. So, for example, we're talking about pushing out messaging about what MonkeDAO is doing currently in Hong Kong. So he was just like, look, just take what we're doing and just write really, really short elevator pitches. Then it's easier for us to translate it and push it out in our native language. And then you can also do that in other countries. And I thought that was a great idea, because like I said, when you're trying to translate anything more than a paragraph, sometimes things do get lost in the translation aspect of it.
I guess this is it. But yeah, we're all around, so let's talk more.
Thanks, everyone.